session where I'll be talking about resolving conflicts with confidence. My name is Linda Mabusela, and I'm so glad that you are able to tune in today. And please remember to watch until the end. And yeah, so today we're basically just going to learn about effective strategies to resolve conflicts with confidence, because we all know that conflict is a part of our daily lives, and it's something that unfortunately we cannot avoid. So today I'm going to be discussing three key factors with regard to this. Number one, it's identifying conflict triggers. Conflict triggers are those things that can trigger you or other people and bring tension between you. And if you don't identify what your conflict triggers are, the problem is that this can lead to miscommunication, differing values, and competing for resources. Because obviously, if one person wants one thing and somebody else wants something else, it's obviously going to cause conflict and misunderstanding. And if it's not managed, it can get out of hand and end up causing even more strife. Some examples where conflict could arise was, for example, if somebody sends you an email and you misinterpret what they've written. For example, if you've been given a deadline or somebody else has a deadline and they don't meet that deadline, that can cause conflict. Or also when you have people with different personalities working together, because it's so important to learn to work with people from different backgrounds and with people with different temperaments, and because ultimately you don't have any control over how somebody treats you, but you do have control over how you respond. Second thing I want to talk about is conflict resolution strategies. The first one is active listening. I cannot stress this enough. And I think I spoke about it at length yesterday. So if you haven't seen it, please do watch yesterday's live stream on mastering active listening. Because when you actively listen to someone, it makes sure that all parties are heard and understood, and everybody realizes that, you know what, I'm actually being listened to, and you are then able to get to the different perspectives that everyone has instead of just your own, because other people may have input which you never considered. Another thing is finding common ground, because even though sometimes you are on opposite sides of the spectrum, with one person wanting one thing and you wanting something completely different, it's important that without shouting and screaming at each other and causing more strife, you actually have a sit down and talk about why it is that this person sees this thing as important and why you see what you see as important, so that you can then address the issue. And also use I statements, because when you use I statements, it's not really threatening and you're not blaming the other person. So as an example, you could say something like, I feel this way when you do this, as an example, like, I feel hurt when you shout at me, you know, or I feel belittled when you shout at me. I think that's a better example. Yeah, so that the other person, you're not saying you belittle me and you shout at me, so you're actually just saying to them, this is how I feel when you do this. And it actually takes the blame away, and you're able to express what you're feeling. And I think, it's another thing is that when you are trying to resolve conflict, it's important to look at all sides of the story. And just to give you the scenario as an example. So there's this person called Sarah and this person called John who work together. So they're both working on a project, and Sarah wants to innovate and bring new ideas and chuck the old, in with the new, out with the old. And John, because probably he's more set in his ways, he wants to rather fix what's not working in the project instead of bringing in new things. Now, how can we use this conflict situation related to what we discussed? First of all, they don't have aligned priorities. okay, because Sarah wants to innovate and John wants to keep things as they are. And as a result, this can cause communication breakdown, and they'll be shouting and screaming at each other because they have different opinions. Um, and also, Sarah's frustration could be that, could be with John, could be his reluctance to innovate and do new things. And John's concern could be, well, we are currently working on this project, and there are things that we can do, to fix things rather than um, bringing in new things. Let's rather fix and make the experience better, and so that we can deliver a better project. So instead of shouting and screaming at each other, they could take part in, they could sit down together and really listen to what each person has to say, which will, and by doing so, Sarah will then understand that John's is concerned with how ensuring that the project is really solid and really runs well. That's why he wants to fix things. And John, by listening to Sarah, will then understand that some of the new features that maybe she wants to introduce could benefit the project long term. And by doing this, they've basically um, will ensure that they can maybe even reach a compromise where they agree that yes, much as bug fixes and fixing the project and making sure it runs well, the existing project that is, they could also bring in some new features, so they could meet each other halfway instead of just shouting and screaming and trying to um, just push what they want. So yeah, that's all I actually just wanted to talk to today. So first of all, it's important that when it comes to conflict, you identify your conflict triggers. These are events or situations that provoke disagreement amongst people. And it's also important, secondly, that you listen, and not just listen to respond like I talked about yesterday, but really listen to understand. Um, because then when you're actively listening, it means you're concentrating on what the person is saying so that you can respond in a way that is appropriate. And also, when there is a conflict situation or you're in disagreement with someone, it's important to find common ground. Don't just try to push what you want at the expense of the other person, but rather um, really listen to what the other person's view is, because they may be bringing in things that you didn't consider. So and also use I statements, as I said, because instead of saying you belittle me and you shout at me, you can say I feel belittled when you shout at me, because then that takes the blame away, and the person is then able to say, oh, I didn't realize that. And because once you start to, when you use you statements, it can actually even cause more conflict. So thank you so much for listening in today, and thank you for joining me. Um, and please join me again tomorrow when we have our next session on yeah. So the session tomorrow will basically be at the same time, same place. So please do to tune in, where we'll be talking about cross generational communication. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to you joining me again tomorrow.